Hello everyone, welcome to the first ever episode of The Ho Show. My name is Riley, and sitting beside me is my co-host and inspiration for the name of the show, Ryan Ho.
Yes, this is the first ever podcast we're making, and hopefully we'll continue to make more after this one. Today's topic of discussion is Japanese youth baseball, and we're going to delve into the borderline child abuse style training that these kids are partaking in.
So firstly, I want to preface this podcast by sharing a little more about how our podcasts are going to be structured. So our podcast, the idea is that we talk about a wide range of topics from sports related subjects to current events and things relating to our own lives and stuff in school. And basically anything that's interesting or new is what we're going to talk about.
Okay. Now that that's out of the way, let's introduce our guest for today's show. He's here to offer some insights on Ichiro's retirement and the current state of baseball in the world. Our friend and varsity baseball teammate, the 6'5", 245-pound machine who tops a 98 and only hits bombs and dingers, Grayson Mashburn.
Hello, fruitcakes. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for being here, Grayson, who will probably be here on most of our future, if not all of our future podcasts as well. So the first topic we're going to talk about is the typical training regimen for youth baseball players. So Grayson, I believe you have it pulled up already. So if you want to discuss that.
So the Little League World Series team represented from Japan is from Tokyo, Japan, and their practice schedule basically runs every weekend on public holidays. Goes something like this. At 6 a.m. they would arrive, stretch and run for an hour, batting, fielding, and base running for the next 2 hours, and at noon they would have lunch. At 1 p.m. they would start their batting. At 2 p.m. they would have a scrimmage, and from 4 to 6 they would continue that scrimmage. By the time the sun went down, that would be the end of practice. So as we can see, it's quite rigorous and very lengthy.
It does sound it sounds kind of similar to our B1 experience, don't you think, Ryan?
Yeah, it's a lot of training. It's especially when you're very young, and we're talking about Little League here, so it's very taxing on the children's body, and sometimes I think it's going to hurt them in their future growth and such. Very prone to injury.
Especially considering these kids are just 11 to 13 years of age.
Yeah, kind of that's what I saw back. So when I played in Bangkok, we always had this team called Mini Bay, right? So they're Thai, Japanese, mixed race. But then there's also if you're a foreigner, you could still play on the team if you made the team. But they're I heard that their training regimen was they ran a couple miles every day and then did some excruciating physical workouts and stuff before and then they just took reps, ground balls and that kind of stuff. And it's not they mix up I don't feel they mix up their workouts enough or do any different types of drills. It's just basically reps of hitting and fielding and just basic fundamentals, and they're just developing that. But to an extreme, sort of.
Yeah, I think this really comes from the Asian culture in general, and how, because you can see this in just Asian education in general. See students taking classes after school, doing the same boring questions, doing math, doing practice questions. Asian students are known for being able to solve very boring questions, but unlike Western education, where we focus a lot on projects or having fun and learning while exploring. Asian education has been known to be very boring and dry and just the very fundamental stuff. So I guess it's how the Asian culture, how Japanese traditions in general just influence the way they train baseball.
I think right now we're talking about local Japanese schools, right? So the Tokyo Little League team, those teams that are representing Japan, those are probably local Japanese schools and ball clubs. And same with this Mini Bay team, they were a local club. But it's also the same kind of underlying principles of these kind of youth baseball teams you can also see in our fellow APAC school CA, during APAC with you want to elaborate on like the story with Bavesh and stuff?
Yeah, I guess the way how Bavesh threw, I remember multiple complete games with more than hundreds of pitches, I would say, and it's just you can see it in the summer Koshien in Japanese high school baseball, their annual tournament, which is a huge thing there, and you just see pitchers throwing hundreds of pitches in complete games after complete games, which are you just don't see it in American baseball at all. You just because here in America the coaches they really focus on pitch count. You don't see a lot of pitchers throwing complete games, especially in high school. You can see that in like major leagues. They value that as like kind of their stats, but like.
And even like rarely in major leagues.
Rarely now.
And you get a 5-day
It used
rest.
to be more, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the idea of arm care and like when these major league pitchers they throw above. It's rare to see a triple-digit pitch count,
Yeah.
and kids in Japan they'll do that on a weekly basis, even without rest.
Yeah, and in Koshien you just see. I remember there was one pitcher who won the national championship that year. He threw, I remember, 960 something pitches.
That's insane.
I think that's 6 complete games.
This is not like a lone occurrence because I also like did some research on that, and like there's other pitchers who are throwing like around 800, 900 pitches, and there's like multiple. Even if they don't win, like they're still pushing them. Even if they don't feel, or even if they aren't in the position to win, they still are going to these extremes. Even like when they're way out of first place or any chance, then they're still like putting their best effort even when they shouldn't. It's like to say if we would pitch a complete game against HK if we were getting beat 10-0 with like me, Nate, and Grayson.
Yeah, and it's just how I think mainly is how their traditions, their coaches in general really like they hold this value, and I think players there really they'll sacrifice their body, their arm, their future in possible professional and possibly playing professional baseball just for a single game, and they really value that glory, especially in high school and in Koshien, because it's really once in a lifetime experience that many value over a professional baseball career. In last year's Summer Koshien, Kanashi Nogyo, a local Japanese high school who went to the championship game but ended up losing to Osaka Toen, their pitcher threw 6 complete games and 881 pitches.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, and eventually they lost that game. It was a blowout game. Everyone thought it was going to be close, but I would say that it's definitely because the pitcher's arm was just dead in the last game, but he was still pumping like 90 miles per hour around that.
But like these are we only been giving examples of pitchers, so I want to move on to like the probably the number one example for Japanese players in baseball history, which is Ichiro, who recently retired. So basically, this is like a not good story for Ichiro, because citing ESPN's exclusive article that they did on Ichiro's upbringings, and I quote, Ichiro said, Ichiro's dad's behavior bordered on child abuse. So, like, what are you guys' points on this? Because I know you read the article too, Ryan.
Yeah, so to sum up the article, it's basically saying how starting from around like 3rd, 4th grade, Ichiro's dad was just pressuring him to play baseball every day, 5-6 hours, and just training every day, doing the same reps, no days off, and it resulted in some really harsh just situations for Ichiro. Just basically, he said that took away his childhood, how he would come to school with blisters and just sore and couldn't walk, and I think this is definitely a part of what shaped him later on in life to become what the player he is. Although it's not been a very good experience for him in his childhood, but definitely contributed a major part in Ichiro's just legendary career. I remember Ichiro just saying like how I remember some interviews with his past teammates saying how routine Ichiro is every day. It's just the same thing. He wouldn't let the equipment manager do anything with his locker, and Ichiro would just put everything in the same place every day in his locker, just by himself, because he values routine. And I think that this kind of borderline everyday training really kind of shaped the way Ichiro trains and plays.
But then again, here, tell me if this is too extremes, because I talked about learning the fundamentals, right? Like the Mini Bay team, they would just take reps and reps after reps after reps. This article cites that they went to a nearby park every day, the same thing, 50 pitches, 200 soft toss swings, and then 50 fungo drills. At night, they went to the batting cage near the airport, and each row would take 250 to 300 swings, and they did this 365 days a year. So in like poor weather conditions and good weather conditions, and like night, day, every day, basically, they did almost like 500 at bats and like 50 to 100 ground balls. That's pretty extreme. We don't do that in the whole like week of practice.
Yeah, we're not even close to being that in a year's practice, I would say.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But I think it's interesting though. But there's definitely a trade-off between when it comes to Ichiro's training. Yes, he doesn't have a relationship with his father anymore, and yes, he lost his childhood. However, he is a $1 million player and played 20 years in the major league. So you could say from one point it was a success on one side of things. On the other side, you could argue that that's not exactly how he would have wanted it to go. But now we can only congratulate him on what a great career it was.
Yeah, but at what cost did his success come?
I mean, like you have to make a lot of sacrifices if you want to achieve a level of what he has achieved now. You can't have like, of course, you need to spend a lot of time into just taking reps in general. But you know, it's the question is, where do we draw the line between what is too much and what is enough? And like, if Ichiro really wanted this, because he definitely loves playing baseball, but does he love it that much that he can push himself to being hurt so much that it's almost it was borderline child abuse.
I think he said in the article this made him not like, didn't he say that it made him not like baseball for a little bit?
For a little bit, but it's for a little bit, and
you think his success brought that liking back for baseball though?
Well, I feel like his new lifestyle could have brought that back, considering like it moved him to a new country and he was by himself and he wasn't with his father anymore. But I mean, you still like there's still the after effects, like especially when Ryan talked about the routine stuff.
Yeah, and he didn't really change his routines after, because like the article also talked about how routine he was when he in his off-season training. If he doesn't like his dad's training style, and if it didn't influence him so much, he wouldn't have like continued his routines afterwards. Like just waking up the same minute, walking out at the hotel at the same exact time every day, going to the same place with the same people, taking the same amount of reps and swings. And it's just really, I think that's this borderline abuse is kind of what made him, his style of playing, his style of training in general, what made him so great.
Yeah, but and here's another question just to follow up. Do you think Ichiro was endowed with talent? Do you think it was like natural, like Domingo Ayala, like God-given, or do you think he was just so heavily disciplined in the fundamental aspects of baseball that he became Ichiro?
It is definitely the latter, because Ichiro has said that, if I remember when in an interview he said something along the lines of, if he can become such a great player, he's 5'11" or something. He's not, and he's not really physically buff, or like you can see it by his weight and his height. He's an average.
He's also like 45, so
yeah, he's an average human. He's an average sized human. He's not really genetically gifted with the hand-eye coordination, or with the height, or with the the length of his limbs that many contribute to being, good for sports. But I think it's definitely the way he trains and how much he trains. He said something along the lines of, if he can do it, then the average human can definitely do it.
And I think the amount of practice he put in, I want to give a stat right here, especially with the 50 fungo drills a day. It's a lot, and so it showed up on his stats. He played in 2,366 games, and his fielding percentage was 99.3%.
Very impressive.
38 errors in 19 seasons and 162 game seasons, which is absolutely insane. So that's right there is something that points to those reps working, and then a career 300 batter. So that's extremely rare.
Yeah.
One season over 300 would be considered amazing, and for him to do it over 19 seasons is crazy. So he's not a huge guy. He's only 5'11", 175. So obviously a little above average, but if that's what it takes, then I guess that's what it is to become one of the greats.
Yeah, definitely. Those reps, he's not the genetically gifted guy that people would say he is. People say there is, but those reps really helped him.
Yeah, so moving on, and I want to start off by referencing the Washington Post article that Ryan was talking about earlier about the guy who threw 881 pitches over 2 weeks. Here, we're just going to talk about some other examples. So, Ryan, I don't know if you said his name, but his name is Daisuke Matsuka or something. And he called him the Boston Red Sox Flameout. And his mythic, and the architect of the mythic gyro ball, which began with a 148 pitch shutout in the summer of 1998. So that's 148 pitches, and that's just how he began his career, basically. The one that really stands out to me here is the performance that came in round 16 of the Koshin tournament, but then I'd say a day later he threw 250 pitches in 17 innings in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, that's a different guy that I was talking about.
Oh, okay, that's a different one?
Yeah.
But that's still...
It just really shows how
250
it's still here.
pitches.
It's been here. The pitch count thing's been Koshin for forever, ever since the beginning of the tournament, and just... his career just how Koshin, because Koshin is such a large part of
Japanese baseball culture
and
everything.
It's like March Madness, but for high school in Japan. It's just crazy. You can see it by the attendance. The stadiums are always packed.
It's more popular than the Nippon baseball league. Right?
Yes, and it's just the amount of glory that they value in winning a Koshin, participating in Koshin. It's just people can just give up whole careers for just one win and one more game with their team.
Yeah, we were talking about it earlier, like the honor and the respect you gained from playing in Koshin, because they take home. So we're discussing this, that they take home the dirt with them from the field after they are eliminated from the tournament.
Yeah.
And then you keep that around as a sign of superiority kind of, or achievement. And then that gains you admiration and respect, which is kind of interesting. And I just think it kind of weaved into that kind of baseball culture of everything's based off discipline and building these values that come from their culture in general.
Yeah, playing at Koshin is just definitely super valued, and I'm not surprised by how many pitchers that these pitchers throw, and considering how much time and effort they spend into training, how much fame they get from it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's several major there's several major baseball teams in high schools that have really strong baseball teams, and they specialize dorms and classes for their baseball players. There's high schools such as Osaka Toin, who won the championship last year, or Kanamaki Higashi, where the school where Otani and Yusei Kikuchi came from. And these schools, they spend 5 to 6 hours a day training, in the morning and the afternoon, every day. People they have special dorms, all the teammates live together, and that's the things we talk. You don't see that in high school baseball anywhere. It's only in Japan where they have this kind of system, a specialized dorm, and just, teammates living together. You see that in the college level sports, but not in high school level sports. And there's really a question on when's the right age to start this. If high schoolers are physically mature enough to endure like 5 or 6 hours trainings a day, every day, in hot weather.
Yeah, but I want to move away now from the Koshin tournament and then move on to actual semi-successes or successes that came out from Japan, and then what they say about their experiences. So, on the Yankees pitcher, what's his name, Hiroki Kuroda, there's an article from the New York Times, and it says the Yankees Kuroda was molded by pain in Japan. That's the title of the article. And tell me how powerful you think this first statement is. As a boy, he sneaked away from his abusive high school coach to gulp water from a polluted river. He saw some of his teammates, desperate with thirst, drink from a puddle, and he heard of others who would do so from a toilet. So what do you think in terms of where we draw that line of how extreme their practices are? Where do you think this goes in that spectrum of severity of?
Yeah. Just reading this, you can see it's definitely like cross the line of being abuse, because it's basic. You're talking about water here, and you're not giving your team water to drink. How are they supposed to perform? How are they supposed to train? How are they supposed to get better, right? And I guess the line is somewhere between this is physically hurting the players. You're not talking about muscle soreness anymore. You're not talking about lifting weights or just being tired and thirsty, but like you're talking about you're not giving players water and just.
Yeah. Then again, this could be a sole occurrence. In the article, it doesn't state that this happened repeatedly. And then the following line states, now 20 years on, Hiroki Kuroda shook his head and actually laughed a little when recalling and trying to explain the hardships he endured as a boy, trying to follow in his father's footsteps and play professional baseball in Japan. So he looks back at it and thinks of it, oh, that was just an experience for me. That was just a challenge to overcome. So what was, if you were put in these situations, what would your opinion be? I mean, you can say easily, once you're successful, you can look back and say, oh yeah, that helped me. But then what about all the other people who don't achieve that same success?
I guess it's just in terms of how much you as a player want to get better, and just how much you want to be able to play baseball at a professional level, right? Because maybe his teammates can't do it, and he can do it. And guess what? He's in the major leagues, and they're not. And it's, this kind of abuses a lot, and depending on the situation, different players can have different opinions on it, because everyone's different. And I think his example really shows that how he reflected back on it, not just laughing it off, just thinking that it made him better. I think it kind of it helped him shape, because if you can endure this type of situation, you can definitely endure any other else type of training. What training can you get that's more harsh than this, right? So
yeah, that's true.
I think this enduring this hardship can really like help you as a player, endure pain, just endure failure.
So do we want to move on to the next topic? Talk about how the
The culture.
culture of it.
Oh yeah, so culture, how culture plays a role in the behavior development and the malpractices. So Ryan, I think you mentioned it earlier,
Yeah.
just a bit, but we did our FOA actually on this. Like there are multiple like things pertaining to the Japanese culture, and I said this a lot, but they're revolving around respect and discipline, right? And that I think these like just general cultural practices shape the baseball player because they're always molded around these practices. So what do you think about that? What do you think about respect and discipline, and how have you seen that in any teams that you face? Because we face a few Japanese teams.
Yeah, I can definitely see it from the Japanese players and teams over playing with them. Before in the little team with SBJ, we used to play against this Japanese team called the Bombers, and you can really see the respect and discipline they have, even though they were only like fourth, fifth, to maybe oldest eighth graders maybe. They're always bowing. They never talk back to their coaches. And they're always running, hustling onto the field, and as you mentioned with the teams in Bangkok, you really see how the culture really stayed with the coaches and the players, even though they're overseas in Thailand and China. And culture. This culture this is really different from what we see in America and the States. In high school, American high schools, you're playing travel ball, summer ball. You're going to summer camps and training.
Even the summer ball things are seem more like a fun recreational thing to do. These are like you see no fun being had on a Japanese baseball team, or rarely.
Well, maybe from your perspective.
Yeah, not from my perspective.
But when you're used to it, when you're raised in an environment that's always about repetition, when it's all about dry and boring stuff, but these are the fundamentals. These things result in success. When you go to see training in Japan, these Japanese players, they don't play summer ball. They don't have travel ball or like summer camps. They just train with their school over break and just staying there for hours, and it's just from the culture of different countries, you can see how culture shaped the disciplines and beliefs that these different players and coaches have in their playing style.
Yeah, but I think it's not only just in baseball, but it goes back to, historical kind of things, even like war stories, like their discipline there, and there's different examples of it. I don't know exactly, but it's just the Japanese way, and so it's just kind of like flowed into what baseball is now, and we can just go back to talking about Ichiro, his experiences. With his dad and stuff, and it's just the way that
what even Ichiro said with those
with their elders.
interactions between his dad, you have a point. It was all about respect between him and his dad.
Yeah.
So I think that was the shortcoming in that relationship. That's why they don't talk anymore today.
Yeah,
But then also again, it has you can definitely see how it has
Major
shaped
impact, yeah.
Ichiro, and we already
as a
talked
player,
about that.
yeah.
And going back to what you said, Ryan, about the bowing and stuff, you always see that Japanese batters before they step into the box,
Yeah.
they bow to the umpires, right?
Yeah.
And I have some things here on Japanese etiquette, the meeting and greeting things. You can see how this corresponds to what we see in baseball. So the bow is an integral part of Japanese society. Is used to greet when meeting, to get attention, to show gratitude, to express sympathy, or to convey an apology. So basically anything related to respect is associated with the bow. So you can see how these things translate not into just their daily lives and their daily interactions between each other, but like onto the baseball field, which you don't usually see in Western society, right?
Yeah,
You don't-
definitely from like just from our APAC games, you know, you always see the CA players bowing, lining up, bowing, and like to not just the opposing team and the umpire, but to the audience as well. They come to your dugout, bow in front of your dugout to the audience from your side, and they go back to their dugout and they bow again. You know, you can just see that how we basically don't we never did that or anything like that. You know, we basically never bowed, but like it's just it's the tradition of displaying your respect. It's not necessarily having, because you know in
Yeah, I
Western
understand.
society you definitely have respect for other people, right?
Yeah.
It's just that we don't show it in this way. You know, Asian cultures really value the display of your respect and showing this respect to others, in not just Japan, but like also China and Korea. You know, especially to like your elders or like to your bosses or whatever. They really value displaying it, and it's just not there in Western culture how you display this respect.
So that's true, yeah. And continuing on, I think if we look at it, that's like looking up from the child's perspective at the adults, right? The respect and admiration and like
Yeah.
discipline and stuff. But then if we just purely take it from the player standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Then you can kind of see this thing. These are the connections we made before when we did our FOA, right? The Confucianism and the submissiveness, right?
Yes.
So-
The apparent submissiveness when other cultures view this what's intended to be as a display of respect as submissiveness, I guess, as we talked about in our FOA.
But not only that, like when they start from a young age, right? They're submissive and they're obedient, right? You see that a lot because
Yeah.
they do
to their elders.
Yeah, to their elders.
Yeah, they're
and that's
taught
that's
not
a sign
to-
of respect.
Yeah, it's not taught. You're not taught.
You don't talk back
To-
to,
yeah, talk
well,
back
even
to-
in Western society, you don't talk back to your elders and you respect
Yeah.
your elders.
Yeah.
But it's on a whole different level, right? Like
It's a lot more emphasized in
yeah, and then
Chinese values and just how Confucianism roots in just East Asian society. In
but I
general.
think that's why they started because their culture's so founded in those
in
roots
Confucianism.
of respect and Confucianism and
Yeah.
stuff, that the submissiveness plays a huge part in starting their baseball careers.
Yeah,
It's
and
because
how-
if
that's
once they're in,
Yeah.
then they're in forever.
Yeah, that's why Ichiro has to follow his dad's rules and strict training regimen, and you know why these coaches they can be so harsh on these players in their training, because if you don't have this like kind of submissiveness to your like superiors, as you can see in like, you can just say no. You
Yeah,
can just
you
say
can see- you
I'm
see
not
that.
I'm not going to your practice. I'm going to a different team.
Yeah.
That's you can do this, but like due to like all the tradition,
It's frowned upon. probably.
yeah, you're taught since
It's
you can
stigmatized in
speak
Japan
to respect your elders,
Yeah.
listen to your elders, and you just can't escape that when your coach is abusive or borderline abusive. I guess it's a good trait sometimes, but not at a certain point.
Yeah, there's like we've been mentioning, there's a certain
Yeah, there's a certain
extent
line.
to where it goes.
Yeah. So-
And then once you cross over that line, but then that's the case. Once you cross over that line, what happens? Because we see like
Yeah.
nothing happens or nothing used to happen, which I find nowadays it's getting better, right? Because when I quoted the Hiroki Kurudo, he's born in 1975. So, and this is another quote: Kurudo is one of the last of a cohort of Japanese players who grew up in a culture in which staggeringly long workdays and severe punishment were normal, and in which older players could haze younger ones with impunity. So basically they're stating that he grew up in the last of this last generation, last of this era of this kind of abuse, but like still it's more subtle, but you still see it today. Whether it be like going over the pitch count, just extra long work days, just Ichiro's story was obviously during this time too.
Yeah.
So this probably moved away from that, but you can probably still find it.
It's still prevalent, and there's really nothing to change it because, people look up to Ichiro and players like him, and they don't see anything bad about it really. They don't see this pitch count as a bad thing. They'll sacrifice for it. They like it, so it's really nothing that's gonna change it that much because we're talking about long-rooted tradition and cultures here, and just how deeply these values are rooted in Japanese culture. I don't think it's gonna really change. This practice is not really gonna change that much anytime soon, at least.
So, to wrap it up, I want to talk about the future. So we already seen, we talked about the past generations and how it's progressing forward, but the future for Japanese baseball and for Japanese baseball players, whether they do go down this path or whether they choose to go down a different path, because I believe the state of the Japanese youth baseball, with the harshness of their practices and the ideologies they've implemented, I think it's mitigated over time, right? Because as we discussed, in 1975 when he was born, that was the last generation of that kind of borderline abuse. But to some extent, they're still being imposed, these practices in youth baseball. And that I think they kind of need this discipline and still needs to be there because it's so rooted in their culture, but they need to move away from how they express and how they carry out these ideas and these principles, whether it be reducing practice times or whatever. So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts, Grayson? Or Ryan?
Well, I guess with how much success has came from people players like Ichiro, Tanaka, Otani, and Otani's been to a school that has a harsh training regimen. You can see it. He went to the same high school as Yusei Kikuchi. Kikuchi pitched, I think, 3 complete games in one of his Koshien appearances until the last game. His arm just really couldn't. He was injured. I think his leg was injured too. But then the coach still put him in when their team started losing around the 4th or 5th inning. Did not end up great. He gave up a few runs. They lost eventually. Kikuchi was crying after the game. And I guess with examples like these, and the Yoshida, the player who pitched in last year's Koshien Championship, how he threw 880 something pitches, and with examples like these, I guess people can begin to see how Japanese coaches are beginning to see how pitch count and these sacrifices are
affecting their players.
Affecting the players, and just I think examples like these will eventually help reduce the amount of harsh punishments and training they get. But many of these players are still succeeding, so.
Yeah, I agree. Grayson, would you like to say anything to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think just going towards the future of baseball and all of Asia, and when we were in the Philippines, I think that's another example. Those kids were really disciplined as well, and I don't know. I think it's gonna get away from what it is now because there's, of course, these Japanese players want to make it to the MLB or go pro, and they'll start to see the effects of what's going on now. So I think it's gonna start moving in that direction. Obviously, we haven't heard stories recently of these players going through the harsh stuff. Like they did 40 years ago, but Yeah, I think Otani is like a good role model for the Japanese baseball players, and
Yeah,
they're gonna try to match him and get to where he is now, and so I think that comes with the realizing what it takes to be successful.
I think Otani has a two-way player, right? And he brings his own special touch to the game, right? Whereas Ichiro, you talked about, he wasn't genetically gifted or anything. He just had the fundamentals.
Otani definitely is genetically gifted.
Yeah, he has talent.
6'4", and just
Yeah. So him being that way, like, that'll, because the way it developed in America is like, you started seeing these players and you idolize them because of how they swung or what they did, and it was on the other side in Japan. It was probably like how much he worked or what it was his training like and this stuff. So as it's kind of getting more integrated, the way Otani's doing it from the Western societal views of like putting your own touch on things, right, and having like something that makes you stand out. Because there's thousands of Japanese baseball players. I mean, not thousands.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of Japanese baseball players who are equivalent in skill level, who are all working just as hard as each other.
Yeah.
And who are all in the same health because they throw 800 pitches in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I guess with this change in, with Ishiro's retirement and Otani and Kikuchi going into the major leagues.
It's kind of metaphor for like passing the torch.
Yeah, and people look up to different players now. They used to look up to Ichiro. Now it's Otani and Kikuchi and Tanaka. It's a whole new generation of players. And I guess with players will more try to kind of follow their type of training regimen now, and instead of Ichiro's how Ichiro was trained. Because Otani's training was like this new generation's training is definitely a lot less in intensity than Ichiro's, at least.
It's more around what they want to do, right?
Yeah.
It's more self-control.
Even though Kikuchi used to have that pitch count problem in Koshien, but he's still healthy and all. So
it's looks pretty optimistic going forward. And with that, on that note, we're gonna end our first ever podcast. So
the whole show.
Yes, of the whole show. And hopefully we'll be back in a week or whenever to film our next one. So
Thank you guys for tuning in, and see you guys hopefully in the coming months.